It is the 27th for the first 2026. The time is 20 minutes past 10 British. And that means, as always, one thing, that there are a multitude of F1-centric threads at which we need to pull. John, Barack, Sebastian. Let me tell you this in the first instance. We have this conversation under the following aegis. Which one of these teams is going to be dominant going into 2026? Which one of these teams is holding the vehicular whip hand? I think we know the answer to that as of the time of writing. That team has a name, and its name is not Red Bull Ford. It is Mercedes. We'll talk to it. We've got some cars out on track. We'll look at some footage. Of course, Aston Martin is saying that they're not going to be anywhere to be seen. Do you know what I mean? TBC. We're testing now, Aston Martin. So where are you, lest you wish to be deemed an F1 abbot of unreason? Some say that Adrian Newey is the god-tieriest one, the last airbender, that he sees airflow, that as team principal of Aston Martin, it's a matter of when, not if. However, again, as of the time of writing, nowhere to be seen. They will not be running. I'll tell you who will be running though. Scuderia Ferrari, Charles Leclerc spotted out on track, private testing, but the F1 community do their bit. Let's have a look at the footage. I mean, not nice elongated footage. Yeah. Bravo, Formula One. How about you get out of your own way for once? F1 fans all over the world are dying, no, fiending for some footage. It's a brand new rule and reg spec. You have yourself, therefore, a god tier opportunity to grow the sport, to weaponize the active aero. But what do? Close the bloody doors yet again. Of course, this makes perfect sense. This feels like, if past his prologue, F1 doing a gatekeeper thing. How very dare you claim, therefore, that F1 is content, that you're looking to grow a sport into new growth markets, mention no names, the United States of America, and then go and close the bloody doors. What are we doing? Privatise the profits and socialise the losses. Ed Straw of We Are The Race had this to say in a podcast yesterday, and bravo to those guys for taking money out their own pocket to go and cover a test that they can't even see cars for. You know what I mean? 600 metres down the road, listening to them, security guards coming out and telling them to move along, because if you're stood on this piece of road and you can see the circuit, the Barcelona, the Catalunya track, then you are standing on our part. What are we doing here? Care? This makes no sense. And to that, Ed Straw says this: they've constantly, they being F1, Liberty Media, the FIA, and the teams even more, that they've constantly talked about valuing the fans and bringing the fans closer than ever. It's frustratingly needless, because there was a great story here to be told on day one of testing and they missed it. They dropped the ball. It's not good for F1's popularity. Touche, sir. Well played. Good game, Ed Straw. Take it to F1, because this isn't acceptable. Oh, and by the way, Maximilian Verstappen, for some say soon to be 5-time champion, seen out on track for the first time today in 2026. I hope they've built this dude a car. To that, Ted Kravitz said this: the Red Bull Ford, I mean, they're worthy of mention, worthy of some praise, since it's a brand new power unit, brand new package, all brand new, and they go out and Isaac Hadjar puts down not only the fastest time in a 1:18.159, but the most laps. You'll understand that because this is testing. There are a gazillion different programs, setups, energy recovery modes, active aero on or off. There are a gazillion different facets for which you will need to normalize to know that in absolute terms, Isaac Hadjar in that Red Bull was the quickest. What we do know though is, if this is due diligence settings, if Barcelona testing is a data gathering operation, then the only number that counts is how many laps they complete. Isaac Hadjar in the Bull that is red completed 107 laps yesterday. Bravo. Now, that's not bad going. And Ted Kravitz says that, you know what, props to them. Brand new faction, brand new power unit, brand new everything. They go out and set the most laps. That props, standing ovation, second to them, only in terms of laps we're talking. We'll talk to the time shortly. 95 laps, King George Russell of Kingsley Norfolk in that Mercedes. Shout out to the boys and girls from Brackley and Brixworth as a gazillion pounds comes in on King George. Heavily fancied our Mercedes. Colapinto in the Alpine did 60 laps. Antonelli did 56. Ocon did 154. Props to Haas as well. That sounds like record-breaking settings. Oh, and by the way, let's talk about the day 2 plans, because this is going to get techier than techie things as F1 community loses its mind because we cannot see. Chris Medland says that it could be a quiet day because of the weather. Let me show you the forecast. I've got it somewhere. In fact, let's talk through what Chris Medland says. The second day of shakedown in Barcelona due to rain forecast this afternoon. Mercedes already confirming it won't use up a second day of track time. This is why you're hearing McLaren are going to rock up on day 3 and just do day 3, day 4, day 5. There are, of course, 5 days of testing, but you can only use 3. If you go out on track like Ferrari have already, then that's one of your days, irrespective of whether the weather forecast is bad. You will be burning time, therefore, in a sport where the story is told in tense upon the battleground. Where races and championship will be run on milliseconds. Chris Medden continues, Ferrari is headed out as planned, but Haas confirms it never intended to run today either. Bloody Nora. Why would you run on Tuesday when it will be wet? Unless you're chasing your tail, as per Scuderia Ferrari and potentially Red Bull Ford. But this was Max Verstappen's day and they're out. McLaren are aiming for either Tuesday or Wednesday to start. So it could well be Wednesday now, but the forecast isn't great for the remaining days either. Monday, this is why you need to get there early. Aston Martin, Williams. And it sounds like Aston are about to sack it off completely. Oh, it's going to get techie. Let me tell you about George. George had a couple of things to say. I will read out his statement, giving props to Red Bull and talking about the Mercedes car and how easy it is to drive. He says, quote, it's great to be back on track, driving an F1 car again. Cars look really cool out on the circuit and that's positive for us. But you know what's not positive for the sport, King George, though? The fact that all this good stuff is going on, all this content, and you are leaving it all on the cutting room floor. Why? George continues, they are quite different. They are quite different, for us as drivers. But once you get your head around it, active aero, energy recovery, managerial championship, driving them, King George says, is quite intuitive. It's enjoyable being behind the wheel, and I think there's a lot for fans to look forward to with these new regulations. We are pleased with our day one. No kidding, Sherlock, but I've also been quite impressed by several other teams too. The Red Bull power unit has completed a lot of laps, mention no names, Isaac Hadjar 107 of which, given that it's their first engine, their first power unit that they've built, that means they've clearly done a good job. Haas also managed to do a similar amount of running to ourselves. So the Ferrari power unit has also put together plenty of miles. It's not quite how it was in 2014. Jerez settings, chaos. That's what F1 feared, and that's why they ultimately closed the doors, because in their mind, loads of cars parked up on track, and the ultimate reliability was not a good look. The optics were too bad. George Russell bookends by saying the sport has evolved so much since then and the level in every single aspect is so high. Now, speaking of high levels, let me flash this up now so you guys can see the times that we're talking about. Isaac Hadjar was fastest, of course, and you take that for a review. Again, you've got to caveat that with this, normalized for a gazillion different variables. The program, the active aero, what was Isaac Hadjar doing with the energy recovery, how much fuel was in the car, but most pertinently, what tyres did he have on it? Ted Kravitz, one of the goatiest F1 journos to have ever goated, he went on the Sky Sports F1 podcast and he had a couple of things to say. This is what we know about the tyres that these teams were bringing. Remember, we made quite a fuss of Red Bull only bringing one set of C2s, and they've put all of their tyre eggs in the C3 basket, proper softs, whereas Mercedes have done the opposite, right? 8 C1s is how much they've brought. No C2s. What is going on here? Ted Kravitz had this to say, though, when talking about trying to normalise for the lap that George Russell did. 0.537 of a second was King George Russell behind. Let me show you this I'm going to show you, I'll flash this up again before. 18.696 was the time that George Russell did. 18.159 from Isaac Hadjar. To that, Ted Kravitz had this to say.
But that Mercedes looks quick. They had a flawless, Craig, they had a flawless filming day, didn't they? Mm-hmm. Where they were first out on Thursday.
Yep.
at the filming day. It was wet, but they did almost 200 kilometers. And then they were beaten in the lap count today by 3 laps by Esteban Ocon in his Haas. In the morning, Kimi Antonelli did 56 laps. George Russell did 95. That's 101 in total. Kimi Antonelli P4 for what it's worth. Russell P2. And Bernie, if that is confirmed that Russell's time for P2 was set on the hard tyre, I mean, am I getting ahead of myself? No. That's quite good, isn't it? But
that's quite good, isn't it? I did not know this. The most critical variable being, of course, the tyre compounds. Apparently, King George Russell has set his time on the hardest compound tyre. What are we doing here, chat? You mean to tell me that Mercedes are so quick? Let's have a look at this. Let me just do this. Do one of these again. Mercedes sets that lap time on C1s. What? Care? Hang on. And again, I am making massive assumptions here. This is speculation and conjecture. In the first instance, we're assuming that Ted Kravitz, if past his prologue, has nailed this, that George was on C1s and that Isaac Hadjar was on C2s. But if that's correct, chat, then Houston, we have a problem. Do my own due diligence. Everybody says that on average, mileage may vary on this, but on average, the C1s are said to be anywhere between 0.8 and a second slower than the C2s. If Isaac Hadjar were on C2s and George Russell were on C1s, and you assume that everything else is equal, which you cannot, that the programs that they're running, that the fuel is more or less equal, that the generation is equal, that the active area is the same, then that means that George Russell and Mercedes have potentially half a second on the field. Let me show you something else that's important. That, ladies and gentlemen, is Kaz. John says Ted isn't to be trusted. Who else if not Ted? I mean, he might not bat 1,000, but he's not a million miles away. It's not quick. It's over a 7 seconds. No, 100% mark. So they're all, we spoke about that yesterday. Brilliant article by Pablo Elizalde, Motorsport Magazine. He says that all these times, they're all sandbagging over the shop, right? Reliability is what's missing critical at this juncture. Cam, this whole community is excited about the viewing of View 2026. Let's go, Sebastian. Let's go. Let me tell you this. There was something else I wanted to mention. And your boy's lost his train of thought. That, though, is... I am... Oh, yeah, here we go. Of those top times, tell me what those engines are. Isaac Hadjar in the Red Bull Ford. Remember, again, we have this conversation under the following aegis. You know already that there's this compression ratio narrative going on, that Mercedes and Red Bull have done something a bit tricky. Tax avoidance design philosophy, that in those cars that they're running on track 18-1, which would make them much more efficient than the other power units. Mention no names. Scuderia, Ferrari, et al. Mercedes and Red Bull Ford therefore have the whip hand. Let's have a look at which, you guys tell me which power units are in these fastest times. Isaac Hadjar, Red Bull Ford, George Russell, Mercedes, Franco Colapinto in an Alpine Mercedes, Kimi Antonelli Mercedes, Haas, Ferrari. That for me is indicative. It aligns, you know, when sometimes you've got to reverse engineer the evidence using your assumptions. I think it's going to be a bit techie. Listen, a gazillion pounds is coming in by the second on the one that they call George Russell. Now the biggest favourite that there's been in 2026 as far as the championship of the drivers' variety is concerned. As at the time of writing, 26% of the time they say King George Russell wins the WDC. Now sits at 11-4. Max Verstappen, 25% of the time. Listen, I think this is going to get techier than techie things. I'm keen to see what comes out from day 2. But rest assured, if there is one takeaway you can take away for sure, take to the bank, it is this. As of the time of writing, King George Russell and Mercedes, the boys and girls from Brickley, have the Brackley and Brixworth have the whip hand to the tune, some say, of half a tenth. Oh, the humanity.